We are the Patriots.
We stand up and speak out for what's right. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on SiriusXM. Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Friday, June 9th. It is Indictment Friday. And joining us, I couldn't get a better guest. It is my friend Glenn Kirschner, former 30-year federal prosecutor, served in JAG Corps. You see him all the time, nonstop on MSNBC. Of course, he has a YouTube channel, wildly popular, Justice Matters with Glenn Kirschner, and a podcast. Glenn, thank you sincerely for squeezing me in between all the other hits you're doing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, but thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure, Dean.
So let me just start out. What jumps out at you when you look at the 49-page indictment of Donald Trump?
Yeah, first of all, I'm glad that the Department of Justice prodded into wakefulness the notion that no man is above the law, because now I think we have a concrete example in the indictment of a criminal former president of the United States that really does give new meaning to that phrase and real meaning to that phrase. If a president can be charged with his crimes, anybody can be charged with his crimes. So that's kind of the overarching good news, I think. And then I'll tell you, Dean, I know you've read the indictment. I've read the indictment. It's breathtaking, just how brazen and how obvious and transparent Donald Trump's criminal conduct was. We've learned, courtesy of this speaking indictment, and I'm so pleased that Jack Smith and his team decided to issue a speaking indictment so we can all see at least some of the evidence supporting these charges. We see Donald Trump participating in, indeed directing, the packing up of boxes, the packing up of classified materials so they could be taken unlawfully, mind you, from the White House down to Mar-a-Lago. We then have chapter and verse of how Donald Trump is showing these documents to people with no security clearances. He's showing documents that involve military plans to strike foreign countries, to authors, to just sort of casual guests to his second-rate or third-rate resort. And he's saying, I guess I could have declassified these, but I didn't, so they're still classified. But let me tell you a little something about them anyway. You have him showing members of his PAC, his Political Action Committee, military plans, and Dean saying things like, well, these are still classified. I shouldn't show them to you. They're secret. But you can look at them, just don't get too close. I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff up. And then the other thing I was really struck by is the conspiracy that Donald Trump was in with his body man and chief box mover, Walt Nauta, because it's so brazen, it's so transparent in its sort of determination to hide these boxes, not only from the federal government when they came a-calling, wanting, the return of these documents, but from his own lawyers. When you read through the indictment, Donald Trump's lawyers, some of the most sharply incriminating witnesses against Donald Trump, are referred to over and over. They're designated Trump Attorney 1, Trump Attorney 2, Trump Attorney 3, and they testified in the grand jury, and they provided sharply incriminating information. What we learned is that Trump and Walt Nauta were involved in a conspiracy by which they kept moving and hiding the boxes, not just from federal authorities, but from Donald Trump's lawyers, who were like figuratively chasing the boxes around, trying to find all the classified documents so they could comply with the grand jury subpoena requiring the return of those documents. So what I love, Dean, at the end of the day, this criminal trial against Donald Trump will be proved, not with the testimony of a bunch of angry Democrats, but with the testimony of Donald Trump's own lawyers.
And his lawyers testified, and I think we talked about it at the time, because there was a showing made that there was a crime, and you can pierce the attorney-client privilege because there was evidence of a crime. So Evan Corcoran testified, and you, if I remember correctly, you knew him a little bit. He was a former federal prosecutor. You knew people who knew him. So here's a real lawyer doing something that no lawyer ever wants to be doing, testifying before a grand jury about your own client. And when you're slightly implicated, because you don't want to be implicated in this because you were lied to. So you've got that. So what do you make of his two lawyers today who had been on TV, especially one of them on TV left and right, even last night, and today resigning after the indictment. It's all speculation,
Yeah.
but do you think it's something they saw in the indictment?
So I don't know if they resigned. I don't know if they were fired. I don't know if it was a combination thereof. But some of the reporting is that, these guys had apparently been filling Donald Trump's head with the nonsense of, they're not going to indict you. They're not going to indict you, Mr. President. And he was foolish enough to believe them. And then guess what? He got indicted. And either he fired them or he said and did something that was so upsetting to them that they quit. I don't know precisely how that played out, but now Donald Trump has to start with a legal team from scratch and get ready for a trial that will probably be held within, the coming months. It could take up to a year, but we can talk about the Speedy Trial Act and the requirement that you take somebody to trial within 70 days of the day he's arraigned, which is this coming Tuesday. Now, Dean, you and I both know federal trials never go in 70 days, and there are lots of ways to stop or pause the speedy trial clock from running. But, this trial may happen sooner rather than later. And now Donald Trump has to go about assembling a new criminal defense team. What is this? Criminal defense team number 18, because he keeps burning through lawyers. I do not like Donald Trump's odds at trial of winning an acquittal on even one of these charges.
Trump right now is on the phone with 1-800-lawyers. He's like thinking about the subway ads that he used to see here, and they're like, who can I call? I'm chatting with Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, 37 felonies Donald Trump is charged with, each one distinct. I went through on the show, for the espionage up to 10 years, for the obstruction up to 20 years, up to 5 years for the misleading and lie statements. If Trump is convicted, Donald Trump is convicted of half of these charges. Does he go to jail?
Yes, has to go to jail, because there has to be a concrete deterrent for others who are contemplating compromising our national security information, mishandling national defense information, which is what gave rise to the espionage charge, obstructing justice, conspiring to do all of these things. If Donald Trump doesn't go to prison upon conviction, and I predict he will be convicted, then there is no deterrent value to this entire exercise. And by exercise, I mean the criminal investigation, the indictment, and the trial. Think about it. If he's sentenced to, for example, home detention, that is a sentence to basically stream Netflix and order DoorDash. That's no kind of punishment. And I think Jack Smith understands that. And I think he will do everything he can to get Donald Trump convicted and ask the judge to send him to prison, probably for the rest of his life.
And it's something, he's turning 77 next Wednesday. I mean, the rest of his natural life, just on actuary tables, isn't that like, we don't really know. I'm not wishing for him to die. I'm wishing him to be prosecuted fully and sit in a prison cell. But that's what I would like to see. What are your concerns? And maybe it's none, but Aileen Cannon is the judge who's going to deal with the arraignment on Tuesday. And we talked about her in the past. She was the judge that came in and bent over backwards to help Donald Trump, who gave her job when that special master application was made by Trump's legal team. And she was then reversed by a conservative court of appeals who were really no basis in law for some of her her rulings. So do you have concerns about Aileen Cannon?
I do have a concern. First of all, she's a Trump appointee. That doesn't disqualify her from presiding over a case involving criminal charges against the president who appointed her. It's not a great look, but it doesn't disqualify her. What I think does disqualify her, Dean, is the way she conducted herself when Donald Trump filed that legal challenge against the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, because what she did was not only unprecedented, it was improper, and indeed it was unlawful. And I'll get to why that is in a minute. But when the FBI obtained and executed a search warrant and got tons of classified documents that they recovered, that is evidence of crime, they recovered it from Mar-a-Lago, from Donald Trump's office, from Donald Trump's desk drawers. Donald Trump filed a motion to try to stop the Department of Justice from continuing to criminally investigate him and using the documents the FBI seized. That's insane. That's not a thing. But what did Judge Cannon do? She ordered DOJ to stop criminally investigating Donald Trump, at least in as much as they couldn't look at the documents, the evidence of crime that they lawfully seized pursuant to a court order. And then she put this special master procedure in place where the special master and senior judge up in New York was supposed to pore through everything, and they were supposed to litigate whether there's any privilege that attaches to these documents such that DOJ shouldn't get to look at them. All of that was sort of legal insanity. So fortunately, the Department of Justice appealed. And as you say, a conservative, unanimous 3-judge appellate court panel told Aileen Cannon, basically what you did was, quote, interfere. That was the word they used. Interfere in an ongoing Department of Justice investigation. They reversed her. They smacked her down figuratively. They got rid of the special master nonsense, and they allowed the Department of Justice to continue its investigation. Dean, when a unanimous appellate panel says that you interfered with this very investigation that produced these charges, I don't think she should preside over this case for lots of reasons. Think about it. Every time she makes a ruling in Donald Trump's favor, what will all the critics yell? There she goes, interfering with the Department of Justice's case again, like she was found to do previously. I would love to see her recuse herself and say the better part of valor is to take myself out of the equation, put a completely uninvolved, not to mention fair, impartial judge presiding on the Trump case and let it run its course. I don't know that she'll do that. And if she doesn't, I don't know if the Department of Justice will file a motion seeking her to recuse, but they might. And I'll tell you, if it were me, I might feel compelled to litigate that issue, Dean, as a prosecutor.
So, you mentioned the speedy trial aspect under our law. The flip side is, though, defendants have ways to slow things down if they want, and if they have a judge who's on their side, like Judge Cannon might be. Do you think Trump, from his point of view, is going to try to push this beyond the election and then do everything and anything to try to win and then try to self-pardon himself after this is all over?
Oh, first of all, I have no doubt that his defense team will try to push this trial out as far into the future as possible. I was on with Jen Psaki last Sunday, and I said, Jen, one of my nightmare scenarios is Donald Trump gets indicted, but the trial gets pushed out so far that he gets reelected. He returns to the Oval Office while his case is pending, because, Dean, we both know what Donald Trump will do. He'll appoint another corrupt attorney general. Maybe he'll go back to Bill Barr, and he will direct that attorney general to dismiss the criminal case against him. Or if he's already convicted and he wins the White House, he will pardon himself. Now, let me hasten to add, I don't believe a self-presidential pardon is constitutional, because if the Supreme Court endorsed that, it would be the Supreme Court putting a criminal president, a dictator, above and beyond the reach of the Supreme Court. So they're not going to do that at the end of the day. But, the other thing is, if he loses the election, if he's convicted before November 2024, and somebody like DeSantis is elected, DeSantis is already on record as saying he would consider pardoning Trump. So, Dean, all of these nightmare scenarios are reasons that we need to get out and vote in numbers too big to rig and too real to steal, so these nightmares don't come to fruition.
I couldn't agree more with my friend Glenn Kirschner. So, Glenn, when you mentioned the conversation between Donald Trump and his lawyer, and it's actually in the indictment, they actually have like a little transcript, and Trump said things to his lawyer about the documents, and, do we have to really turn these over? And could you, indicating, can you just pluck them out, the bad stuff? Just so people understand, even though you don't say affirmatively, hey, just hide this, when does it attach criminal liability for this kind of efforts to obstruct justice?
Well, when you tell your lawyer, hey, before you turn this stuff back over to the government, to the grand jury, to the federal prosecutors, as I am legally required to do pursuant to the grand jury subpoena, why don't you just pluck out the documents that might make me look bad? Dean, what you've just done is solicit a crime. And fortunately and interestingly, his attorneys didn't go for it. And that's why his attorneys didn't end up on the wrong side of the V, United States of America V versus Donald Trump and Walt Nauta. It looks like his attorneys refused to play his criminal reindeer games. They stood fast. They collected up what documents they could. It seems they didn't know Donald Trump hid boxes from them, the attorneys who were attempting to collect up all of these documents and return them pursuant to the subpoena. So the attorneys look like they're going to come out of this okay. They may have exercised some poor judgment, maybe some negligence in certifying in writing that, oh, we conducted a diligent search and turned everything over. Well, not really, but still, they didn't end up on the wrong side of the V. They're not defendants. And so I'm glad that they at least did the bare minimum to, keep from seeing themselves indicted.
You mentioned Walter Nauta again, who's also a co-defendant in this, and they're both charged with conspiracy. Do you think DOJ normal procedure would be try to get him to flip or to work with them against Donald Trump?
Yeah, Dean, the only reason we see Nauta as a named co-defendant is because I have no doubt the federal prosecutors worked mightily to bring him on board as a cooperating witness, to have him plead guilty to the crimes he committed in that conspiracy to obstruct justice with Donald Trump, and then have him flip and testify against Donald Trump in exchange for a reduced plea or perhaps a sentencing cap, reducing the prison term he's going to have to serve. And he said, nope, you're going to have to indict me. And Jack Smith said, consider yourself indicted. And now what will happen, I can promise you, is they will step back to Nauta's defense attorneys. They will say, what you going to do now, sport? Because now you're facing a whole lot of time and you saw the speaking indictment, you're done. So do you want to come on board now? We're not going to give you as generous a plea offer as we would have had you cooperated earlier on, but there's still an opportunity for you here. I can't tell you how many times I did that. And once a person sees their name as a marquee defendant in a criminal indictment like this, it gets their attention, and plea negotiations often get sort of jump-started after that. And it wouldn't surprise me if you saw Nauta sort of fall out and become a cooperating witness.
And last couple of things, I'm chatting with Glenn Kirschner, former federal prosecutor, MSNBC legal analyst. Any chance you think Donald Trump would try to reach some kind of plea deal in this at all?
Well, we all know how Donald Trump likes to admit his mistakes and take responsibility for his misconduct. I think the only time we've ever seen him apologize was after he got caught on that Access Hollywood tape saying, my MO is to sexually assault women. He apologized once. I don't think I've ever seen him apologize or take responsibility for anything since that time. So no, I don't think Donald Trump will plead guilty. However, it wouldn't surprise me if his new criminal defense team came in and explored with the prosecutors the possibility of resolving this case short of trial, saying things like, well, if you'll dismiss the case against our client, Donald Trump, he'll withdraw his candidacy for the White House. Or, maybe he'll plead to a lesser charge if you promise him a sentence to probation so that he never has to serve 1 minute in prison. Or here's the outlier, Dean, but I wouldn't put it past Donald Trump. I could see Trump saying, I still got a whole bunch of classified documents. And if they dismiss the case or give me a sweetheart plea, I'll return the rest of those classified documents to them. All of these things with Donald Trump are within the realm of possibilities. I don't think Jack Smith will go for any of it. And I think it's time to take Donald Trump to trial, get him convicted, and imprison him to deter others from following the same path.
And you just touched on something a listener called a short time ago, that war plan for Iran, that document seems to be missing from what I've seen. Is there, if they find out more evidence, just say like Trump actually gave it to someone, conveyed it to someone for something of value, they can do a superseding indictment and charge it with more?
They can continue to add charges. They can continue to add defendants if they find more evidence against co-conspirators. I found it really interesting that Walt Nauta was the only named co-defendant charged in this case. What that tells me, Dean, is there are a whole lot of other people who have cooperated. Now, that
Wow.
cooperation may involve guilty pleas with a promise to testify truthfully against Trump and others, but those pleas would remain under seal unless and until the prosecutors needed to unseal them and make public the fact that they had cooperated. But this was a bigger conspiracy. Likely, this was a bigger conspiracy than just, Donnie and Walt. I'll bet other people have already taken responsibility for their piece of it, and we may see some of those people testify at the future trial against Donald Trump.
And you and I together have been critical of the slowness of DOJ in the past. With the charge now, and it's U.S. v. Donald Trump, how is your view now of DOJ?
Yeah, I don't think I've been critical of Jack Smith because he was appointed on November 18th. We're talking 6 or 7 months ago, Dean, and we've both seen him move aggressively and at light speed, putting people in the grand jury, and not only putting people in the grand jury, but defeating every single roadblock Donald Trump and his lackeys, the Mark Meadows and others, tried to throw up, claiming bogus privileges, attorney-client privilege, executive privilege. Jack Smith defeated every last one and secured their testimony before the grand jury. So I have never complained that Jack Smith moved too slowly. I will always believe that Merrick Garland moved too slowly and did not meet the urgency of the moment, because this stuff should have been charged a very long time ago. The insurrection should have been dealt with promptly beginning on January 7th. We still have no accountability for any of the suits of the insurrection, just the boots, just the people Donald Trump ordered to attack the Capitol. So, my faith is restored a little bit in the Department of Justice writ large because of this indictment. And I still have faith and trust and confidence in, the overwhelming majority of the hardworking people, men and women of the Department of Justice. I just don't think in hindsight, Merrick Garland was the right man for the moment.
And last thing, he had to approve this going forward with the charges, right? Jack Smith had to go to Merrick Garland, because if Merrick Garland technically could have stopped this.
That's what I thought until I heard some reporting today. I wish I could put my finger on it, but I remember it as being a sort of a major outlet that for whatever reason, this was not a decision that was vetted through Merrick Garland. I really need to take a step back, and we need to drill down and figure out if there is more information about whether Merrick Garland had to approve or had the ability to veto and didn't veto these charges. Either way, Merrick Garland, to his credit, has said since day one, even though he took too long to get there, that no one is above the law. Everyone will be held accountable for their crimes, and there are no exceptions to that. Well, Merrick Garland's Department of Justice made good on that promise today.
Well, Glenn, thank you so much for joining us today on the big news and the indictment being unsealed. I look forward to chatting with you in the future, brother. Have a good weekend.